welcome to the Business Builder Series. I'm Scott Abbott, and one of your hosts for the show today. And most importantly, we will be speaking about sales call effectiveness and how you can help grow your business by having effective sales representatives or account representatives working for your business. And today with me, we have on the show Doug Montague, who's had many years of experience managing call centers of varying sizes and lifetime experience in how to train and coach and support a call center team in making sure that they are very effective in converting leads to appointments for home service companies. As some background, I'm one of the founders of Five Star Painting and the CEO of Pronexus, and Doug actually runs our call center here at Pronexus. So with that, what I thought we'd do is we'd start off with some of the questions that have been asked of us from many of you as we've talked to you about how to grow your business, as to how to be the most effective with growing your home services company. So, Doug, welcome and thanks for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Doug, let's jump right into some of the business principles and training of call center agents that would you think would be the most valuable for someone who's running their own home services business and maybe have their own small team that they're managing with their leads and their customers. What kind of call center measures do you use to ascertain the performance of your center?
Well, when it comes to strong sales, it's important, like any other function, that you measure people's success. And the statistics that we use most often would be obviously a close rate or conversion rate. Uh, we also measure people's utilization of time to be sure that they're making calls quickly and using their time properly in order to make as many calls as possible. To some degree, it is a numbers game. The more calls you make, the more you will close. So we follow and track their conversion rates, um, and we have a QA team that listens in on the calls, quality assurance team that rates how well they are doing in a number of metrics, including the tone of their voice and the quality of their uh, introduction, things of that nature. Hitting on certain uh, key things like trying to close a sale, uh, moving immediately into trying to understand the customer's issue and what problem or solution what problem they have and what solution we might offer for that. Um, so a lot of time management and assessment and looking at the quality of the interaction that they have with people goes into being sure that they're converting as many calls as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. I thought let's maybe, for the benefit of all of those who are listening today, go ahead and share some of there's three key metrics I know we use to manage our center presently. Maybe speak to, what is service level. Let's educate everyone what that means. What does speed to lead mean and how we measure that and why is that important? And maybe speak to the speed to answer, or how many seconds pass before a phone is answered on average.
All right. Some of the other metrics that we use aside from speed to lead would be our service level report. Service level is an expression of what percentage of the inbound calls you're responding to within a certain time. Our standard rule of thumb for in our operation is an 80-20 service level. We try to reach 80% or answer 80% of the calls within 20 seconds, which is about 3.5 rings. And we manage staffing according to that metric so that we're capturing as many calls as possible within the quickest time possible. And then time to answer, the service level is set at 80% of the calls within the first 20 seconds, but on average, we maintain about a 17 or 16 second answer speed to answer. So 2.5, 3 rings, and we're there on the phones.
So I think what's probably worth also sharing is, in any operation, in any business, knowing what the most important numbers are is what's the most critical thing, right? If everyone knows that we're all measuring service level, speed to answer, and speed to lead, it's something that the entire operation can focus on. And so I know that for us in our business, it's something that every person in the business understands. What I would just really advocate for you as you're operating your company, as you're thinking about your call center or your agents that are working for you or your whatever team that's answering and handling those leads, make sure that everyone understands, including the people taking the calls, that those are the three numbers you're looking at and managing too. So let's talk a little about more culture driven stuff. One of the biggest challenges in any call center, as you know, Doug, over the years, is retention of key people and staff, right? Hiring quality people, getting them trained, and then retain them for as long as possible. I don't know if you know the exact average. I've heard that turnover rates for most call centers is about 6 months. So most employees on average will stay at a call center for about 6 months. I know in our operation, we're substantially higher than that, which leads to better quality overall in the operation. But I'd like you to speak to how you can create a family atmosphere with the team in the center that you're operating.
Yeah, and that's becoming more challenging as we move through the COVID era and we move people off the site and we have more remote employees. That whole issue is a whole new challenge, but it's been a fun one to take on. Uh, it is all about culture and what kind of priorities we set as a culture. It's important, of course, to treat all your employees fairly and to communicate uh, the standards that you want as often as possible, which can be challenging in an environment where you can only communicate through emails and Slack channels and that form of communication. Um, in order to offset that, we try to do some more regular meetings where we bring people and maybe we do focus groups on different brands to try and enhance that, breaking people into smaller teams that can communicate regularly during the day is very helpful. We utilize Slack quite a bit and have channels that are not only directly business related and brand related, but also places for the agents to talk among themselves, share their experiences on the phones, the immediate calls that may be a little odd, so they can laugh off the stress of some difficult calls or build camaraderie by sharing recipes or talking about their upcoming weekend or anything of that sort. So increasing communication in any way possible and consistently stating our goals and building up our crew through positive reinforcement in a remote environment has allowed us to get through the last year in very good shape. We're still operating with people in the call center, but we have a lot of people remotely working now as well. And I've, I'm very pleased with the culture that we're growing that way. It's really nice to see agents interacting and sharing those experiences and building people up in those ways.
And maybe what I'll do is I'll just kind of add on to that. Something that I've enjoyed as the CEO of Pronexus is once in a while we'll have a call, but once a month, with supervisors where we kind of review the why. Why does Pronexus exist? What are we doing for the end user and the customer, as well as what problems are we solving for the franchisees, and reminding the agents how important our organization is in delivering success for the people that we work for. And I think when you, as an organization, understands their purpose and their why, people are more interested in being a part of it and knowing that they have and fulfill an important function in any business. So let's jump off onto maybe answering some questions about running and operating and growing a business in the home services industry, specifically with outbound calling. It's becoming more and more important. I know a lot of home service companies are buying leads from Home Advisor, from Porch, from Thumbtack, or others. And what used to be, in our business, it used to be you just wait for the phone to ring and take care of it. Now you're texting people, you're emailing people, you're calling people, outbound in nature. How important is outbound? Give us a sense of like what percentage of the calls we are handling at Pronexus that are actually outbound in nature, and how do you handle that?
Well, about a third of the calls that we place each day are outbound calls as opposed to the two-thirds that are inbound. And then we have the what you mentioned, the SMS text and chat, which gives us um, probably about 5% of the contacts that we make each day. The outbound call is definitely different than the inbound in that it's the sources that those leads come from are quite variable. They come from a lot of different sources. Some of them cost a lot of money to the independent franchisor for us to receive them. And in some cases, the people we're calling are very aware that they've asked for a contact. And in some cases, they're not really sure why we're calling. So it's important that that initial contact starts with a friendly, ready to go agent who uses an introduction. We suggest that they, whenever possible, they address a person by their first name and get quickly to a point where they understand what the customer is looking for and reassure that customer that we'll be able to take care of their needs as we continue to go through the call and get the booking settled. Um, a moment ago, we talked about culture and establishing a good culture. The importance of that, a culture that recognizes the value of every phone call is very important in this process. As an agent who sits on the phone all day, quite often they'll look at each call as just another step along the way. They handle when they're talking to a lot of people, they'll handle 10 calls an hour, and if they're getting no answers, it could be up to 20 calls an hour. But from that perspective, they may not always value, if we don't reinforce this thinking, they may not always value uh, how or see how valuable each one of those calls or contacts is. So it's important that we keep reinforcing that every contact is important. Every call that they make has the potential to earn our customers some money, and we need to be very careful with each one and treat them with kid gloves and do everything we can to close that sale.
Yeah, I can add on to that as well. I've attended a lot of conferences with various brands we work with and don't work with. Met a lot of franchisees, and one of the questions I usually ask any brand we begin to work with is, what is the largest sale they've ever made that's come from a lead? And in some industries, it's $500,000 off of one phone call. And so, making sure that's part of your DNA and that your agents understand that there's a large investment that went into making the phone ring. In some cases, it's thousands of dollars, so that's a significant amount of money was spent to make the phone ring, right? Step one. Then two is that there's a significant amount of revenue that comes into that location or your business if you ultimately convert that person to an estimate. Let's talk about effective phone sales. There's soft skills, which is just training people how to be good on the phone, as you mentioned earlier, making sure they're smiling when they're talking because that comes out in the conversation, and ultimately training the human component of how to interact with people over the phone. And then there's also very structural or systematic processes that can ultimately drive effective phone sales. What I wanted to talk about is the things that we do at Pronexus or any small business should be doing to make sure that they're effective. And one of those things that I would want to stress is how critical it is to be persistent, right? Doug, maybe just talk a little bit about, how often we make a sale on the very first attempt when we call a lead, and how many calls we're making to any single lead or texts or emails. How persistent are we to make sure that that lead that's been brought in is ultimately found and scheduled?
In fact, less than half of the calls that we place initially result in a closed lead. So we do need to make additional contact to those numbers. We make between 5 and 7 phone calls to each lead until we rectify it and make the sale. We also include up to 3 texts to that customer. The initial phone call is made, as I said, within 5 minutes of seeing the lead, and we make 2 more follow ups on that day, one 15 minutes after the first call, and then another that day to try and close that lead before they move on and are grabbed by another franchise or another business. It's important that we try to stay on top of those figures and make those outbound contacts as quickly as possible, um, because there are diminishing returns at every step of that. As I said, 50% are converted on the first call, and diminishing returns as you go down to where we end up with conversion rates in the 70%.
I think what you mentioned there is really important, Doug, and I'm just going to reiterate this for those that are listening today. And that is, first of all, we talked about speed to lead, right? How much time passes before we call that lead initially. So if your speed to lead, so the lead comes in and it takes you, let's say, 2 hours to call that lead, your first call close is going to be way lower than at Pronexus, where we're calling that lead in 5 minutes. The other thing that is effective phone sales skills is making sure that when you are calling, you're calling from a local number, not a 1-800 number. So you're always appearing local to the customer. And so, as you said there, getting that lead immediately is critical. We know that less than half of the calls we make, even when we're calling in less than 5 minutes, result in an estimate. So after that, you got to make sure your team are being very effective around follow-up and leveraging all the tools possible. And so, as you mentioned, Doug, texting the customers, calling the customers up to 7 times over the course of 1 week, emailing the customers. Every one of these touch points increase your likelihood of turning that lead into a job. And like we mentioned before, one phone call, one lead could result in a $400,000 job for many contractors. It could be that large project that pays for the entire marketing campaign for the whole year. So we don't ever be in a situation where we're just losing business because we're not being effective. One of the things that came up as a question that came from some of our listeners is, what incentives should you be putting in place for your staff to make sure that they're effective and aligned with you and interests? And I know that at Pronexus, we charge by the appointment. And we do that because we want to align ourselves with the interests of our clients, which is they want appointments. What are we doing at Pronexus to make sure that our staff are incentivized to convert leads to appointments?
Agents follow with regard to their own performance is an overall conversion rate, and we reward that with a bonus at the end of each month. Uh, they're able to see that in progress, and understand where they stand with conversion rates. Um, Having that metric in front of the agents is important because one of the best drivers to performance is a little bit of competition. So when you've got other agents that are converting, people like to keep pace with the pack and do those conversions as well. So we're sure to communicate at what level each brand that we handle is converting in a certain time period, and give agents visibility to how they compare to the average conversion rate at that time.
I love it, Doug. That's great. Let's talk about one of the number one things that stands in the way of small home services businesses growth, and that is time and scalability. Ultimately, the owner doesn't have the time to do everything, right? They own the business. They don't have the time to take all the phone calls and run all the jobs and run all the accruals. They have to start scaling something. And so one of the very first things that tends to be scaled out or added onto is that customer experience piece where you can hire people and train them. Maybe speak to how we help at Pronexus owners deal with that time component. How do we give them more freedom in their schedule?
Well, certainly having a phone ringing in your pocket while you're trying to deal with the subcontractor or work out the specifics of a job that you've already landed would be very distracting. So by using ProNexus and having our 24/7 call capability, the franchisor can be free to concentrate on those other areas of the business that aren't so easily contracted out to somebody like us. We are here to receive those phone calls. We're here to do that in the most professional manner, and that is the purpose for which we exist.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the decisions a home service professional needs to think about, right? As they think about scaling their business and leveraging their business in some ways, the first question you need to ask yourself, right, is going to be, what function can I outsource that pays the least, right? So thinking that through, if you can hire a agent or a call center representative to work for you in your office at, let's say, $14 or $15 an hour, that means that every time you take a phone call as an owner, you're getting paid $14 or $15 an hour, right? And so you look at your next piece of your business, and that may be your sales force. You have a salesperson that's outgoing and busy with homeowners in the field, and you would probably pay that person a base of $50,000 or $60,000 and have some kind of a commission program. Maybe show them the capabilities making 90 to 100,000. So every time as an owner you go and run those calls yourself, you've now traded your time for that wage. And every time you run a job, if you have an operations manager who would do that for you at 60,000 a year, every time you run those jobs yourself, that's the wage you're taking. So I think one of the secrets to growing and scaling a home services business is to think about your time in that way. Every time you trade your time for something, what are you getting paid for it? And then outsource those ones that would cost you the least amount of money, which is why in our business has been so successful, frankly. Most home services companies realize the first thing they can outsource is their customer experience solution. Okay, let's jump into how to maybe manage the seasonality of your business in your home services space. And so, for some home services businesses, this is very, very seasonal, right? Like, for example, mosquito control or pest control, it spikes in that May, June, July timeframe, and then it calms down. Uh, what are some of the things and how that a business can do to manage the seasonality of their business? And maybe, Doug, what I'd like you to speak to specifically is what we call the win back program.
Seasonality is certainly an issue for a lot of the franchises we deal with. One of the things that one of the programs that we have at ProNexus that can help with that issue would be our win back program. That's where we would call back people who had received an estimate from a franchisor but not taken the next step and actually booked the work. We find that if we call those back regularly, we convert about 1% of those calls into actual jobs that have already been estimated and set up. And by just placing one more call, we are able to glean out more revenue. Oftentimes at a time when you're not in the middle of a business spike or in a peak season. So as an individual, that's something that a franchisor could do on their own. They come into the slow season, dig through those old leads, and try back and see if somebody just is ready to make a move on that job at that point.
Yeah, and I can even share a little bit from our experience around executing win back for a few brands that we own. We've been in the painting business, the bathroom business, and lighting business, and I know from some statistics that we tracked at in those businesses that we saw about 2 to 3% of the people we got a hold of that had an estimate that had been completed but not won or booked. When an agent got a hold of that customer, they're able to get that person closed to a job. Which means, if you're doing these win back programs, like for example in the painting space, you may be really busy in March through November, and if you're running your win back in September, October, you can extend your business now into December and January. Okay, what I'd like to do now is maybe speak about, I think, a really important topic. It's becoming more and more important over the last couple of years as the different marketplace partners like HomeAdvisor, Thumbtack, Angie's List are getting larger, and they're taking a bigger piece of the entire lead flow funnel. And we have really specifically two things that we have isolated as being the number one causes and drivers to the highest conversion rates. Doug, can you speak to those? What are the two things you need to do best to convert leads from marketplace partners? And maybe give us some stats around that.
Yeah, certainly when calling outbound leads, the key is to react quickly and be persistent. The statistics are clear on that.
Yeah, let's speak to some of the numbers that you can use to help manage your business. First of all, when you're dealing with leads from marketplace partners, 78% of the jobs go to the person who calls first. So speed to lead is absolutely critical. And if you can get to that lead within 1 minute, it's been proven to increase your conversion rate by as much as 391%. So once again, speed the lead, absolutely critical. Next, around being persistent. 94% increase in contact rate by calling 6 times. So you just can't call once and be done. You got to call once, text, call again, text, email, call again. Being persistent will drive your contact rate and ultimately your conversion rate. And then about 50% of sales or converting a lead to an estimate happen after the 5th touch. So you need to expect to attempt at least 5 times to make the most of your sales. Okay. So those are all some great tips and some numbers you can use in managing your home services company. Okay, Doug, for those who are listening that are running a home service business, have 1, maybe 2, or even 3 agents handling their calls currently, what would you recommend they should do around incentives to keep their agents aligned or customer service representatives aligned with their business?
Well, certainly with a smaller team placing calls, a monetary incentive would be the first way to go. I would suggest making it a fairly substantial monetary incentive, giving them a base wage that will keep them from looking for work elsewhere, but then giving them a real opportunity to earn uh, with each conversion.
And how about competition, Doug? What are some ways that they can actually keep their agents focused on those conversion rates and competing with one another?
Another motivator is certainly competition, and that doesn't always have to include a monetary reward. Just the simple recognition for being the best often is a great motivator and doesn't cost you anything.
So let's talk a little bit about what you can do in terms of how you step into outsourcing certain elements of your business and when to know when to do that. So in a lot of your business functions, there's a step function, right? Each time you add 1 salesperson, you now increase your wage burden by 60,000 base or 50,000 base plus commissions. And similarly, on your operations side, running a crew, project manager, that's another step function. Each time you grow, you have to add 1 more person. So as you look at your business, think through how can you use an outsourced partner to reduce your burden of business as you scale until you can actually fill that function yourself, if you feel it's necessary. So a great example is marketing. You could hire a VP of marketing for $100,000 a year to do your marketing for you, or you could hire an agency at $1,000 or $2,000 a month to do that for you for a lot less money, but get all the experience and knowledge they have as experts in that area. So clearly there's some functions you shouldn't ever outsource, right? If you are in the painting business, it'd be very hard to outsource the sales piece and closing those jobs for your customers. But if you are in the painting business and you're now looking at doing some more lead generation, or you want to add on more staff to handle calls, those are elements that you could easily outsource. There are many partners out there that exist, and it would reduce your burden to the business overall and allow you to scale faster. Great. Well, hey, thanks everyone for tuning in and listening to this Builder Business series. Hopefully this has been valuable as we've talked through how to be effective with your sales team in your business. And we look forward to seeing you on our next show. Hey, thank you for watching this episode of the Business Builder series. I'd like to extend a personal invitation to you to attend our free workshop on the sales funnel mastery. I've been using these techniques to grow 5-star painting, 5-star bath solutions into an international brand. And I want to see your business grow. Register below. Hope to see you there.